Hi, I'm Lisa Anderson, President of the ASCM Inland Empire chapter and also President of LMA Consulting Group. And I am thrilled to be here today with Barbara Weg, who's going to talk to us about some very timely topics in our webinar series. And today we have partnered with ASCM chapter of San Fernando Valley. That's exciting. We have collaborated together for many years. And so I'm glad to be doing that again today. So with that said, we will get started quickly, and then we will recap with what's coming up in terms of APICS. And so I would like to introduce Barbara, at least briefly, and she will add to it. Barbara Weg is a supply chain consultant with CMTC, and she really specializes in and has over 30 years of manufacturing experience, specializing in global sourcing and procurement strategies. So that's a really important topic in today's supply chain, especially as we're dealing with all the geopolitical risks, tariffs, global uncertainty, and changing conditions. So we're excited to hear from you today, and our topic today relates to these skills. So Barbara, with that said, I will turn it over to you to talk to us, and then if everybody has any questions, please put them in the chat. We're going to save them up, and I'm going to we'll facilitate a Q&A after we get through the core content.
Thank you for the introduction, Lisa. And for those of you who might not be familiar with CMTC, we are California's MEP Center, which is a public-private partnership under the umbrella of the Department of Commerce, NIST. So it's our firm's mission to serve as trusted advisors, providing solutions that increase the productivity and competitiveness of California's manufacturers. As mentioned in the introduction, I'm Barbara Weg, and I am an ASCM certified supply chain consultant. And I have 30 some odd years of contract manufacturing experience in a variety of industries, specializing in global sourcing and procurement. As Lisa also mentioned, as you can imagine, this past year, we've been talking a lot about tariffs. And with the increased interest in domestic reshoring initiatives, we've had many inquiries from clients about wanting to promote and market that they manufacture products that would be considered compliant to Build America, Buy America Act, or BABA, as we call it. So, of course, we like to remind folks that this webinar is informational and should not be considered legal, financial, or professional advice. We're presenting the best practices based on our understanding of the current situation and publications. These tools may continue to evolve as our understanding and application changes. So today we're going to present an overview of BABA, including waivers and what those are and how to get them. We'll review details and examples of the manufactured product category published in the BABA memorandum. And then we have some examples of companies that are actively marketing their BABA compliant products. And in addition, we're going to review strategies to mitigate the effects of tariffs. And then, of course, we'll field questions at the end. And you're going to get copies of this recording. You're going to get copies of this deck and any worksheets I mentioned throughout this presentation. I'm going to provide freely and happily. Okay, so let's dive in. From a macro perspective, if you want to bid on federal infrastructure projects, the agency issuing the purchase order or providing financial assistance will provide the details and guidelines that they want followed. And even though the language of the requirements outlined in the BABA memorandum is consistent, each agency may have their own worksheets and specific documentation that they require to show compliance. So this is the excerpt from the published BABA memorandum addressing the three categories listed. I can provide a copy of the BABA memorandum as well as the BABA guidance fact sheet for anyone that's interested, or maybe I'll just give that to Lisa so she can distribute that after this webinar. So today we're going to highlight manufactured products, but I wanted to make sure to include the other two categories in the BABA memorandum, and that is iron and steel products and construction materials. So some examples of iron and steel projects would be related to iron and steel materials used for bridges and highways, water infrastructure, electrical transmission, and transportation components. And construction materials are everything else that is not iron and steel. So plastics, glass, lumber, drywall, non-ferrous metals such as aluminum, copper, and brass. So based upon our clients' request over this past year, we decided to parse out section 2, which is manufactured products, and create a process flow with instructions and a worksheet that our clients could use to determine and or potentially engineer products that could be considered BABA compliant. So as you can see in this excerpt, all manufactured products used in covered projects must be produced in the United States, and that the cost of the components of the manufactured product that are mined, produced, or manufactured in the US is greater than 55% of the total cost of all of its components. So then the big question that we needed to address was whether or not all of the components of the manufactured product was required to be produced in the US. And we were able to extract from the BABA guidance fact sheet that compliance does not require all the components to be produced in the United States. So the fact sheet further provides instructions as to the details to be considered when calculating the cost of the components. So as you can see here, for components purchased by a manufacturer, the guidance instructs us to use door-to-door landed cost. That means if the component is purchased domestically, the inbound freight is included with the purchase price. If the component is purchased internationally, the landed cost includes the purchase price, freight, tariffs, custom clearance fees, and ground transportation or last mile trucking. For components manufactured by the company, you can include landed costs and applicable overhead, but you do not include direct labor or profit. And I'm going to also provide the Excel worksheet we created for manufacturers to do a little granular drill down on their bill of materials. So one of the biggest challenges in many sectors is that we do not yet have the domestic supply chain infrastructure built out to produce certain high volume or technology-based components. And this is where an organization may need to apply for what's known as a BABA waiver. So as you can see here, there are specific guidelines listed, but it's really the federal agency that will have the last word as to whether or not your firm's application to manufacture under a waiver is approved. And as you can see under the first example listed, you could apply for a waiver if it's found that applying for the domestic content procurement preference would be inconsistent with the public interest. So this could mean that there's an overall non-availability of domestic products, or there would be unreasonable cost increases. So for example, a waiver could be considered if incorporating domestic products would significantly raise the overall project costs, generally by more than 25%. In addition, a waiver might be considered if project delays and disruptions would prevent the timely delivery of essential services. So the waiver steps usually include proof that you've made a domestic sourcing effort. And as of late, I've been assisting companies as well as city and county agencies with the steps as to how to post their supplier scouting opportunities on the MEP national network. So those responses, or lack thereof, will then be part of what is used to potentially apply for a waiver if needed. Of course, there's always the opportunity that you might in fact find a domestic supplier that matches your needs through posting on the national network. And again, I'm happy to provide assistance if anyone is interested in finding out more about how to do that and apply for BABA waivers. So here you can see some examples of manufactured products. I won't read up through all of them, but if you look at the last example, this is very similar to a project I worked on recently for Caltrans, which is under the authority of the Department of Transportation. So in this example, the company is manufacturing LED lighting for public roads. And as I mentioned earlier, the assembly must occur in the US and 55% of the materials must be domestically produced. You can use imported components as well, but they cannot exceed 45% of the total costs. Okay, so and here's the Excel spreadsheet I mentioned. It is an extremely simple worksheet that folks can use alongside their bill of materials to easily calculate the total percent of the US manufactured cost. So in this example, you see that the total cost of this fantastic box, as we called it, is $7.05. And the landed cost for the imported components are $2.05. So the US manufactured content is almost 71%, well above the 55% threshold required for compliance. So for those of our clients that have initiated the BABA discussion with us, we've been suggesting that they pull up a few SKUs and do this analysis just to get an initial baseline of where they are before making any big sourcing decisions or changes. So this is a very basic worksheet, and then I will include this with a copy of the deck for Lisa to distribute. So if at first glance the math does not pan out initially, a company could drill down a bit further on their bill of material. In the best case scenario, we're able to help our clients reshore the imported components by qualifying a domestic supplier. However, if that's not an option, we suggest they work with their international manufacturer, freight forwarder, and customs broker to see if they could explore engineering that component to refine the harmonized tariff schedule code for that particular item. And we're going to discuss this in more detail shortly. Okay, I don't expect anyone to be able to read any of these. So this is just a graphic representation of a self-attestation letter. So this slide is showing 3 examples of self-attestation letters that a supplier could use to document compliant to BABA requirements. So basically, these are just on a supplier's letterhead and state that they certify the products they're providing complies with Build America, Buy America best practices for documenting compliance. And I have a sample that I can send you if you request that from me individually. And I can provide it as a Word document. So 2 of these documents that you're looking at here were actually downloaded from the FEMA website that FEMA provides to their manufacturers. And the other sample is from a lighting company back east that promotes that they have a line of products that comply with BABA requirements. Again, these are examples like the bill of materials, and just to provide a jumping off point. And again, I want to emphasize that each agency may have and usually do have their own forms or format they use for proof of compliance, and they'll provide those to you when you give those up to your suppliers to sign, or maybe you're part of the flow down process, and the prime will get you those forms. So in the beginning, we mentioned that we had clients that, although they may not have a specific project they're currently working on, they wanted to be able to differentiate their company by developing a marketing strategy to promote a line of products that could be considered BABA compliant. So this particular slide shows companies involved in manufacturing, construction, and infrastructure related products, and how they're actively promoting their compliance to BABA front and center on their websites. So similarly, here are 2 examples of companies that are promoting that they have products or a suite of products of which they will attest are compliant to BABA requirements for manufactured products. So in these instances, the companies have created a specific line of products that are BABA compliant. These may cost more due to domestic raw material inputs, but they are manufactured alongside the other SKUs that may or may not be considered BABA compliant. Okay, so now we're going to move into the tariff and risk management portion of our discussion. As Lisa had mentioned, I have a sense that by now everyone has some understanding of what tariffs are, but I also want to provide some information as to where to find the best resources to tap for the most up-to-date information regarding your international supply chain. So very basically, a tariff or duty is a tax imposed on foreign-made goods. This is paid by the company that imports the goods in the United States. These duties are collected by the Customs and Border Protection, or the CBP agency, at 328 ports of entry across the country, and then that revenue ultimately ends up at the Department of Treasury. Almost every country imposes tariffs, and these rates are published in the harmonized tariff schedule, and we're going to provide a link where you can find that document. So we suggest that your best resource to tap to identify the most up-to-date rates are consulting with the originating manufacturer, freight forwarder, and customs broker. So here's just an image that shows you a picture of the front cover of the most recent harmonized tariff schedule. As you can see that as of September 2025, we are currently on revision 23. I have to be honest, in this world, having this many revisions is quite unusual throughout the course of a year. So when we talk about opportunities companies have to potentially mitigate the effects of tariffs, there are basically three levers you can pull. The first is related to the country of origin. The second is related to product classification. And the third is the first sale rule. So when we say country of origin, this refers to the country in which the item is manufactured and is not related to the shipping port. So the CBP is very strict about checking and investigating those folks that are moving manufactured product from countries with higher tariffs to other countries that have lower tariffs of origin rate before then importing them to the US to try to avoid a higher rate. This is completely not in compliance with regulations. So for example, just within this last couple of weeks, I've had several companies contact me that were trying to de-risk from the high rates initially imposed on China imports by moving them to a warehouse in Vietnam and then shipping from Vietnam, thinking on their commercial invoice or their packing list, it's going to say that Vietnam is a country of origin. That is not correct. That is not what we look for at the US ports. The tariff is based on the manufacturing country of origin. Okay, so the harmonized tariff schedule we discussed earlier provides the tariff rates for every classification of product. So this is where we can open up a discussion regarding strategically adjusting the product's design and or assembly process so it falls under a more favorable rate. So this is commonly known as tariff engineering. So for example, we'll go back into the lighting company. If you're importing a lighting assembly and there are two distinctive sub-assemblies, such as the metal housing and then the wiring components, you could consider shipping these items separately if one component has a more favorable rate than the other. And you might even consider reshoring one of those sub-assemblies, such as the metal housing, that could easily be produced domestically. The third opportunity refers to what is known as the rule of first sale, which could lower the entire shipment value on which the tariffs are calculated. So many firms may be purchasing with or without their knowledge their international shipments through a sales broker who upcharges for their services. So there's an opportunity to avoid paying tariffs on those increased costs and only pay for the originating manufactured costs. But this is a bit more complicated process, as it requires your broker and whomever you're actually purchasing from to be transparent and be willing to reveal the manufacturer and their actual costs. So it requires a lot of transparency and cooperation. So you don't have to write these down because, again, you're going to get a copy of this deck, but here are the resource links I mentioned that can assist importers with gathering additional information. The first link provides an overview and explanation of tariffs. There's also a link to download a copy of the most recent harmonized tariff schedule. In addition, there are links to assist you with finding a list of freight forwarders and custom brokers if you don't already have them in place. So we're going to spend the remainder of this webinar discussing supply chain risk management. When we talk about supply chain risk management or SCRM, we generally categorize risks into two buckets, right? So those that are internal risks and those that are external risks. The internal risks are those for which an organization has some level of control. They're generally operational in nature. And external risks are those in which an organization has very little control or no control, which are usually geopolitical and regulatory in nature. So the key takeaway from this portion of our discussion will be identifying and providing actionable steps as to how a company or organization can develop internal strategies to mitigate the effects of the external risks that could potentially affect them, and then also how to plan for all this uncertainty. So let's take a look at some examples of internal risks. So these can reveal themselves as process inefficiencies, such as product coming off the line with quality issues, or even equipment maintenance issues. There are supplier reliability challenges, such as poor performance due to shortages, delivery, or quality issues. There could be compliance issues related to IT failures, such as cybersecurity issues. There are workforce disruptions, generally related to insufficient training or lack of department succession planning, turnover, or morale issues. And finally, there can be financial risks that are related to cash flow challenges and budget overruns. So now let's take a look at some examples of external risks. So political instability, such as changes in government policies, civil unrest, or international conflicts, we all know can severely disrupt supply chains. Transportation delays can occur due to several factors, such as port congestion, labor strikes, or logistical bottlenecks. And we're not just talking about, the water levels in the Panama Canal or avoiding routes near the Red Sea due to escalating international conflicts. We have plenty of domestic port disruptions as well. So earlier this month, at the Port of Long Beach, I think we all saw 67 containers fell off a ship into the water and onto a nearby barge, causing temporary suspension of operations at one of the piers. And then I think we probably all saw in March of last year, a container ship in Baltimore struck one of its piers, causing a bridge to collapse. So there are natural disasters, weather-related events, wars, and terrorism, and these all, again, have catastrophic impacts on supply chains. So another example of an external risk could be demand variability driven by economic conditions or competitor actions. This leads to supply-demand mismatches, overstocking, and stockouts. There's customer or consumer pressures. Maybe you're having a whole bunch of clients that have demands for ethical sourcing or even faster delivery. These all influence supply chain practices. For those companies that have global supply chains, we know that tariffs are impacting supply chains and increasing costs for businesses. Legal, regulatory, taxation, other port or customs issues can affect supply chains through compliance requirements and trade restrictions. So now that we understand we have no control over the external risks, we have identified what can we do to mitigate the potential effects these external risks can have on our businesses. So what plans can we put in place? So the first topic I want to discuss is supplier relationship management. So this is where you strengthen your current supplier collaboration by developing long-term partnerships. Approaching risk management as a joint initiative, and make sure you have transparent communication and shared contingency planning. Your international supplier has boots on the ground in country. And if you have a great communication channel established, they can help you think outside the box to problem solve. If you regard your supplier's services as strictly transactional, they may be less likely to offer assistance when an unexpected event occurs. So equally important is establishing a supplier scorecard program that outlines all the criteria for evaluating and monitoring your supplier's performance. Are they financially viable? Do they have a record of quality and regulatory compliance? Are they in a stable location? So once you've assessed a potential risk, then you're going to determine the likelihood that that risk occurring, and then the impact that could potentially have on your company, either positive or negative. So another strategy for managing external risks is to improve inventory management. So maybe a concerning event has already occurred and you're hoping to quickly qualify another supplier. So we're suggesting in the meantime, you could increase your safety stock levels and front load some of the inventory from your current supplier. That'll relieve some of the pressure to perhaps hop into a relationship with a new supplier before you're really ready. Another option is to explore vendor managed inventory systems, stocking agreements, blanket purchase orders, consignment inventory, on-site managed inventory. And lastly, but most importantly, utilizing, leveraging technology, ERP, MRP, or warehouse management system to help you optimize your inventory management. So another strategy could be to take a look at your supply chain visibility from a technology perspective. So implementing real-time tracking and monitoring tools is a great proactive approach to ensure that potential problems are addressed before they impact users. So you can leverage AI and digital twins to develop predictive analytics and risk forecasting and modeling. You could implement blockchain for improved transparency or traceability. I think we can all expect, and maybe we already have, to see more and more of these technology tools deployed and utilized moving forward. Taking a look at your logistic and transportation strategies could assist with managing the potential effects of external risks. Explore alternative transport modes and multimodal logistics. See if your freight forwarder will provide door-to-door logistics services. So you have one company combining different transportation methods to move your freight. Your freight forwarder probably is and might use dynamic routing, which uses real-time data and technology to adjust shipping paths on the fly. You could explore utilizing the services of a 3PL, a third-party logistic firm that handles warehousing, inventory management, and order fulfillment. So when it comes to financial risk management strategies, we're always going to advise you to seek professional financial advice. It could make sense to import your goods into a foreign trade zone. These are designated areas usually, but not necessarily required in or near a port of entry. Here, goods can be stored, manufactured, or reconfigured, and the duties are deferred until the goods leave that zone. Another financial benefit within the foreign trade zones could be what's called tariff inversion. So this occurs when the imported raw materials or components are converted into a finished good, thereby leaving the foreign trade zone under a completely different harmonized tariff code and tariff rate than the individual components would have originally been subject to. So BMW has a foreign trade zone. They bring in their wiring harness, their frames, their motors, they assemble it. It leaves the foreign trade zone as a complete finished car vehicle. Your supplier may offer the opportunity to lock in the currency exchange rate at the beginning and end of your contract. So you don't have to be concerned about the volatility of fluctuating rates. There's a contingent business interruption insurance that's available, and specialized supply chain insurance that covers events like natural disasters, political unrest, cyber attacks. And lastly, we suggest diversifying financial exposure across multiple regions. So if you have two suppliers for the same item, but they're both in the same geographic area, then they will be affected by the same events, and that could also expose you to increased risks. Okay, so when it comes to managing supply chain risk, regulatory compliance, as we probably all know, is an ongoing effort. Staying current on trade laws, regulations is essential, especially as all the global policies shift and evolve. A good starting point is developing a strong internal compliance program and integrating that into your day-to-day operations. So these programs, as we know, should be practical, regularly updated, and clearly communicated across your teams. And once again, we're going to suggest that you connect with legal experts early that can help you anticipate regulatory changes, manage contractual obligations, and ultimately protect your business from costly disruptions. And lastly, there are those firms that import regularly regularly into the US, where it might make sense to become CTPAT certified. Some of the benefits include reduced customs inspections and faster processing times. Protecting your digital supply chain assets like ERP systems, supplier portals that we all use, and shared data platforms. So this is critical to ensuring business continuity. So just as you would assess your vendors for quality or delivery performance, it's equally important to evaluate their cybersecurity posture. A weak link in your supply base can easily become an entry point for cyber threats and that impact your firm as well. So resilience isn't just about systems and suppliers, it's also about people, cross-training employees so they can step into multiple roles during a disruption, builds a lot of operational flexibility, and then it keeps things moving when surprises hit. Embracing remote and flexible work arrangements can also expand your talent pool and improve retention. And finally, investing in upskilling and reskilling initiatives ensures your workforce stays agile and capable of adapting to new technologies, tools, and processes. So a well-prepared team, we all know, can often be your strongest line of defense when the unexpected happens. So if you haven't already contacted your ASCM hosts on this call, I would like to highly recommend that you reach out to them. And I know each of them would be more than happy to put together an education and training programs to assist in this area. So in summary, I would like to suggest that you revisit your sourcing strategies, especially if you rely on imports in targeted categories or high tariff countries. Stay alert to potential freight volatility and shipping lane disruptions, especially as the tariffs are shifting, transportation and inventory planning. Execute dual or multi-path strategies. So front load your inventory from your existing supplier, and then at the same time, qualify new suppliers. Shared cost models. So this is where you're going to work with your suppliers and customers to absorb some of these tariff related expenses. That's an option. Maybe the manufacturer can absorb a third of the increase, you absorb a third of the increase, and you pass along a third of the increase to your customer. And utilize professional resources, particularly if you are a large importer. Legal and financial compliance is crucial. And as I mentioned, your ASCM chapters have great education and training programs to assist you with upskilling and reskilling initiatives. And then I'm also happy to connect you or refer you to other professional resources as well. And finally, the most important is to be flexible. If you've tried a plan and it doesn't seem to have the desired effect, be open to a possible pivot and try something else. So that is really all I have for now. I've been talking for 30 minutes, so I'll stop and I'll hand it back to Lisa.
All right. Well, and since we're going to pause the recording for the questions, I'll go ahead and talk about the next upcoming webinar. And please be thinking about questions. I'd love to have an interactive discussion here. And let's tap Barbara's expertise so that we can make sure all of our companies and us as individuals are successful going forward. So thank you very much, Barbara. And I would like to talk about our next webinar coming up with ASCM Inland Empire. Is going to be on November 3rd. It's going to be China and the supply chain, geopolitical realities and trade strategies. So that's another vital topic for what we're experiencing in today's supply chain. So we'll keep tuned for that, and we appreciate the partnership with San Fernando Valley, and thank you to Barbara.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me today.